says, David left these things with the keeper of the supplies. He ran to the battle lines and greeted his brothers. As he was with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his usual defiance, and David heard it. When the Israelites saw the man, they ran from him in great fear. Now the Israelites have been saying, do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give him great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage. And, get this, he will exempt his father's family from taxes in Israel. I don't know, would you have one of your kids marry one of Obama's daughters? It was tax-free the rest of your life. One of Bush's kids? I don't want to be politically neutral here, but that's what he's talking about here. I mean, dude, you're going to get to live for free. Isn't it interesting that all these thousands of years ago, what did people still want to get around? Taxes, it's all good. It's tax season here in the United States. That really rings true. Look at verse 26. Now David asked the men standing near him, what will we do for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? David got it. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine? See me later if you don't understand that. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? They repeated to him what they'd been saying and told him, this is what will be done for the man who kills him. Now, so David here is really acting like a teenager. I use poor Kyle Ambrosino. No, he's not poor. But that's I can just see David acting like Kyle there. Oh, I'll go with him. No, this is Kyle. Kyle's 18, 19 years old, 6'1", 6'2", big strapping kid who just thinks he could probably whip anything that he needs to whip. But I'll talk to Kyle about that later. We had a lot of fun with that. I wanted to abuse him a little bit behind his back. I did it in front of his back before. But isn't that just like a teenager to some extent? They volunteer for something before they really think it all the way through. And this was what's kind of fun. David's big brother, Eliab, takes exception to it. Look at verse 28. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, and by the way, he had at least 4 or 5 older brothers that would have been there. Okay? David was the baby, if you remember the whole story. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him. And he asked, why did you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down here to watch the battle. Now, if you're not a big brother, you don't understand how you can be mad at your little brother. But if you're a little brother, or a little sister, I guess, too, you know how your big ones can be mad at you and treat you like garbage, right? And that's what's going on here. He sees his little brother like big tough guy. Yeah, I'll take this guy on. Man, he just lays into him. And what I love is David's, look at his little innocent reply, verse 29. What have I done? Said David. Can't I even speak? I just like that. What have I done? It's not me. Verse 30. Then he turned away to someone else, and he brought up the same matter, and the man answered him as before. David was just a teenager. But David was filled with something that is so beautiful and so unique. And what happens is, King Saul, now he's got this huge army of tens of thousands of men in front of him, and tens of thousands of men over there are fighting his army. You got Goliath. The king's getting desperate. And the word gets back to him that there's this big, tall, kind of good-looking kid that says he'll go take on this guy. And the king is so desperate, he says, okay, bring him in. Look at him. Pick it up in verse 32. I did that right. Verse 32. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied, boy, here's an older guy trying to talk sense into a teenager, right? You're not able to go out and fight against this Philistine or go against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a boy. He's been a fighting man from his youth. Stop here. I suspect Goliath was like 5 foot tall when he was young. You know what I'm saying? Can you see this? He was that kid that just defied he was just huge. As soon as he was big enough to walk, guess what he started training for? Because they saw this. And they knew his brothers. If you find out one of his brothers had like 6 fingers and 6 toes on each foot. It was just they were genetic freaks, okay? And as soon as they were big enough to carry the sword, they started training them to be merciless soldiers. Soldiers. They were the shock troops that went in first and just scattered the enemy and sent him running in fear. It was working good this day too. From the youth, he was slinging a sword, and his sword was huge and scary. Look at verse 34. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Yeah, that doesn't sound like such a teenager, doesn't it? I whooped him, man. But here's the rest of it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be just like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. But note verse 37. The Lord, whoa, I got that underlined in my Bible. Maybe I'll do that in your Bible. The Lord, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. The Lord. And Saul said to David, go and Lord be with you. In other words, suicide, baby, take off, go, have at it. Because, listen, there was no way that this kid could do this. David was brave. David was bold. Was there any sense of danger here? No. Why? Verse 37 again. The Lord, who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. It wasn't foolishness. See, you and I, we sometimes go after challenge foolishly, and here's why. We will go about a challenge by ourselves. Out of our pride, I'm not telling anybody I got this mess. So you come into church, you paint on the church face. How's everything going? Just fine, praise the Lord. But you can't hardly drive out of the parking lot. Because what you really wanted to come in and do was to get somebody to pray for you. But in our pride, we put up this wall that says, I'm under control. And by the way, women are just as bad as men at doing this. Why are women dropping dead of heart attacks more than ever before? They're just as bad about calling 911 as we are. When I was laying on the floor, I said, you better call 911. So, practicing what I preach. But listen, folks, when a challenge comes, will turning away from the challenge help you at all? Just ignoring it? Oh, it's not really there. Oh, really? Really? How about seeking the wrong help? Don't call 911. Call the neighbor down the street. We talk about fishing. I wasn't breathing that much, was I, honey? Listen, you got to get the right help. Because if you put off going to battle, you put off this thing, the enemy only gets stronger. You tell Satan, just ignore me, I'm going to ignore you, I'm going to ignore you, I'm going to ignore you. He will bring in more demons in your life. More things will go wrong. He will pile on to the point where you can't breathe anymore. Where spiritually, you begin to give up. Because he has piled so much on you, you can't see the empty tomb anymore. Because when you stand up in faith and you say, by the empty tomb of Jesus, I rebuke you, he's got to go. Now, does that mean the battle's over? No, but the battle turns at that moment. And you have the upper hand because you're not fighting alone. You got to recognize the challenge. You got to accept the challenge in step 3. The challenge must be prepared for. Now, heavy, bulky armor makes good sense, doesn't it? I mean, back in that day, because the way they were, something would throw at you, you want it to bounce off you a couple of times before it push down. So look at verse 38. Look at verse 38. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic, which is the undergarment, and he put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried to walk around because he was not used to them. I cannot go in these, he said to Saul, because I'm not used to them. And he took them off. Now, we believe that the armor that he was putting on was Saul's armor. What did that mean about David? Saul was a man, he was a 6'2" guy amongst a 5'2" people. When Saul was walking through the crowd, his head was taller than anybody else. He was a head taller than anybody else. He was Dennis Rodman in North Korea. Okay, maybe that isn't a great illustration, but you know, one of our dear friends up in Twain Harbor, Her son is 6'9". Buddy, he wants to ask, how did you ever ask people that are of average height, well, how short are you? Because everybody walks in and says, how tall are you? And he's 6'9". He's a firefighter. And I can't imagine how much it costs to get his turnout gear. But here's the cool part. He gets a hold of stuff that nobody else can reach. He is great on a structure fire. He just goes like this. Oh, they got to grab a step ladder and do